All right, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. All right, I know somebody has some coffee this morning, right? Okay. My name is Greg Harris. I'm the manager of post office operations for the 601 and 603 areas. That's what I govern. I'm very proud to be here today as we honor Betty White, who was born in Oak Park. Before we start our program, there are some people who can assist you. Please raise your hand if you need any assistance during the program. Also, please put your phones on vibrate. All right, I see everybody putting their phones on vibrate. Very good. Very good. We now ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be followed by the singing of the national anthem by Chicago letter carrier Kaylin Hayes.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
You know, our nickname for Kaylin is The Voice. All right, I would like to introduce for the welcoming comments this morning, Kenya Thomas, our postmaster of Oak Park.
Good morning. Thank you, Greg. By the way, Greg is my boss. I am Kenya Thomas, the postmaster here in Oak Park. I have seen a few of you here in our office sometimes, and thanks. Feel free to come down anytime to visit us. Thank you all for being here today for our ceremony to celebrate one of our own from Oak Park. Yesterday in Los Angeles was the first day of issue of the Betty White stamp. So today is the second day of issue, and it's fitting to honor her here where she was born. I am truly honored to be a part of this ceremony. What a career and life Betty White had, almost reaching 100 years of age. A little background on her. Betty Marion White was born on January 17, 1922 in Oak Park. When she was 1 year old, her family moved to Alhambra, California, and later to Los Angeles. Into the television, a pioneer of early television with a career spanning almost 7 decades, she was noted for her vast number of television appearances, acting in sitcoms, sketch comedy, and game shows. If you recall, her husband, Alan Ludden, was a longtime host of The Password. White, after moving from radio to television, became a staple panelist of American game shows such as Password, Match Game, Tattletales, To Tell the Truth, and The Hollywood Squares. Her biggest roles include Sue Ann on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Rose on The Golden Girls, Elka on Hot in Cleveland. For her lengthy work in radio, television, and film, White received various awards and nominations, often referred to as the First Lady of Television. White was honored with 5 Primetime Emmy Awards for her work on television, as well as 3 Screen Actors Guild Awards, a Grammy Award, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She was introduced into the Television Hall of Fame in 1995. White was also much recognized for her animal welfare work. Thank you all again for coming today.
Now, you guys are fortunate to have the postmaster you have. I mean, she is an excellent postmaster. She knows the postmaster. So you can't say I didn't say anything nice about you today. All right, teasing. Okay, so our first speaker today is Ms. Vicki Skaven, Village President of the Village of Oak Park. Please welcome President Skaven.
It's my honor to be here. This is exciting. To celebrate this new stamp that will honor the fun and fulfilling legacy of Oak Park native Betty White. I am particularly proud to have this opportunity to celebrate a Betty White stamp during Women Leadership Month. Betty was a fierce champion of human rights and the treatment of animals, as well as of female entrepreneurship. The Village of Oak Park takes pride in being Betty White's birthplace, celebrating her legacy as one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses. We could use a little laugh now and then, can't we? While she lived a full life of nearly 100 years and enjoyed a career that spanned 8 incredible decades, as the longest serving female entertainer in TV history, we know that it is here where she was born. Though she moved with her family to Los Angeles, as we've heard, when she was just over a year old, Oak Park remains an important part of Betty's legacy. After her passing in December of 2021, just weeks before her 100th birthday, Oak Park honored her with tributes, including local events and social media celebrations. I had the honor of speaking on her 100th birthday, just after her passing, in our own downtown Oak Park with an event hosted by Growing Community Media. The Village declared on January 17, 2022, that would have been the 100th birthday as Betty White Day, with further special events and tributes to her and the causes she has held near and dear. Betty's lifelong legacy for wildlife and habitat preservation aligns with the Village's commitment to green initiatives, sustainability programs, and eco-friendly policies as outlined in our own climate-ready Oak Park plan. In October of 2022, I was joined by our village manager, Kevin Jackson, Smokey the Bear, that was super exciting, and partners from the U.S. Forest Service, the National Association of Foresters, and the Ad Council for a tree planting ceremony to recognize Betty White and her lifelong dedication to protecting wildlife. A new stamp, Betty White oak tree was planted in the median along Randolph Street between Lombard and Harvey Avenues. The location was chosen because it is approximately 1 block south of where Miss Betty White briefly lived after being born in Oak Park. Accompanying the tree is a plaque that acknowledges Miss White as a devoted advocate for wildlife prevention, protecting our nation's forests, and promoting Smokey Bear's message. Looking forward to seeing this stamp and going home with some of them today. Thank you.
We're honored to have our next speaker, Frank Lipo, Executive Director of the Oak Park River Forest Museum. Please welcome Mr. Lipo.
It's a pleasure to follow our Oak Park Postmaster and our Oak Park Village President that have given us a little bit more of some of the bigger picture stories and kind of tied Betty to our community. So many people across Illinois and the entire United States know Betty for her humor and quick wit across so many decades and so many hit shows. Or perhaps they admire her love and advocacy for animals, as we've heard. She was a woman of great depth and empathy. But I'm here this morning, as historians often do, giving you some backstory. The reality is that even though she was here briefly, there's sort of an origin story that ties to Oak Park and to Austin and our neighbors to the east in Chicago. So I think there's just a connection that's really important for us to know at a moment like this. really, since all history is ultimately family and community history, it is so important to connect with the real stories about our parents, extended families, close friends, and how our hometown shape us all. Betty White's family, of course, Betty White was born in Oak Park in 1922, as we know, and she moved away when she was just a small child. But she treasured return visits when she came to visit her extended family. This morning, I will tell you a little bit more about this, and showing that sort of lifelong love and ties to Oak Park, even though she was gone at such a young age. Betty's parents were both born in 1899, just like Oak Park legends, scientist Dr. Percy Julian and writer Ernest Hemingway. Unlike Dr. Julian's roots in Alabama and Hemingway's roots here in Oak Park, all of Betty's grandparents were first-generation immigrants. Betty's father was Horace White, and her mother was Catherine Kachachis, who went by Tess or Tessie. Horace and his sister Emma were born in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to Danish immigrants Christopher and Etta White. They later moved to Green Bay and then down to Chicago. Tessa's parents were Greek immigrant Nick Kachachis and Canadian native Margaret Hobbs, who met and married in Chicago. So these folks who came from different parts of the world ended up in Chicago, both sides of her family. By 1918, when Betty's dad, Horace, joined the Army to serve in World War I, his family lived at 704 North Central in Chicago, just south of Chicago Avenue. By that point, the Kachachis family lived at 4110 Washington Boulevard, just west of Pulaski and within a short walk of Garfield Park. We don't know details of their courtship, but West Siders Tess Kachachis and Horace White, only 22 years old, were married on February 19th, 1921 in Chicago. And they chose an apartment in Oak Park at 220 Pleasant to be their first home together. 11 months later, Betty came along. After an eventful 2 years, marriage, a new baby girl, the Whites moved to California, as we've heard, as her father pursued his career as a salesman of industrial electronic parts. But the Oak Park connection doesn't end in 1922 or 23. Betty's dad, Horace, had one sibling, Emma, who married Hugh James. Emma and her husband, Hugh, lived with her parents in Austin at the time Betty and her parents left for California. A few years later, in 1926, Betty's aunt and uncle bought the house at 214 North Taylor in Oak Park, and within just a few short years, her parents moved in with them. Both her grandparents and her aunt and uncle lived in that home until they died, sort of one by one, as the grandparents and later the aunt and uncle died, where their uncle was the last to die in 1965. They evidently were a close extended family from the stories that come to us. They had those deep roots with decades in Austin and then 40 years in Oak Park. In a 1989 letter to the Historical Society, Betty White recalled visiting and staying with her aunt, uncle, and grandparents in that house on Taylor I've just mentioned on multiple occasions as she was growing up. She didn't recall the exact address, it's just the old house on Taylor, and as she wrote this letter, but she had fond memories of those visits back to her hometown. Even in the letter, sort of incorrectly assuming that that was the house that she was born in, because like the family story is like that was the old family home. It was that place of gathering of the extended family, associated with the fond memories of her grandparents and her aunt and uncle in those visits back to Chicago and to Oak Park. In a letter, that same letter I just mentioned that she sent to my predecessor in 1989, she graciously thanked. This is like one of those things, like a letter was sent off and like 10 days later it arrives directly from Betty White, didn't have the hallmarks of sort of a PR agent or somebody like you're responding for, very personal letter. And she started talking about some of these Oak Park memories I just recounted. That quick response had that warm personal touch that she was known with in her public communications, and that was one of her hallmarks. She really said she appreciated the interest, enclosed a bio, a photograph, a signed photograph, for the files of the local historical society in her hometown. Betty closed with a P.S., and I will let her have the last word today in her own words. P.S. I'm always careful to explain that I was born in Oak Park, not Chicago. Thank you.